Hello and welcome again to Word of Faith Fellowship radio program. This is Mark and I'm here with my good friend Jonathan Kidd. And today Jonathan wants to share with you the amazing journey in his life that God took him recently as he went through law school and saw the miracles of God and God's hand on his life. And then God brought him through law school and he is now practicing law in Shelby with some of his friends there. And Jonathan's life is a testimony. I've known Jonathan since he was young, and Jonathan is an amazing person because he's one of the most humble people that I've met, and yet his gifts are so strong. He won't tell you this, but I will. He actually went into law school with a full scholarship because of his high academic performance, and he ended up graduating law school at the top of his class. In the midst of law school, because of his performance, he was actually offered an internship with who is now our Chief Justice, Paul Newby, over the Supreme Court of North Carolina. At that time, he was one of the Supreme Court justices of North Carolina. And that was an invaluable experience for him as well. And I know he's going to share some of that with you too. But I asked Jonathan to come on this program because God did so much in his life through that journey. And God taught him so many things. And I know that you'll be blessed. I know that you'll learn as Jonathan walks us through his experience and God teaching him. And you know, a lot of times God strips us and God brings us to places where we just can't do it. And then we turn our heart to God and God does it through us. So you're going to hear how Jonathan went through law school knowing Jesus Christ. So Jonathan, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here today with you guys and just share some of what God has done in my life. I know starting out, when I felt like it was God's will for me to go to law school, I didn't know how it was all going to work out. It wasn't like my parents had a bunch of money saved up for everything, but God just opened the door at every point. And like Mark said, I got a full scholarship and all the glory goes to God. It was absolutely nothing that I did to earn that or anything. It was only God, you know, and his provision for me, even provided me a place to stay. Everything that I needed, you know, I just got married like a month before law school and, you know, all my classmates were like, how are you going to make this work? But, you know, God just was right there to lead me through each step. Right. And, you know, growing up, going to a Christian school and learning God's ways, I know one verse that really was always taught to us, and it really helps me, you know, through law school, and it's in John 6. It says, it's written in the book of the prophets, they shall all be taught of God, have him in person for their teacher. And, you know, Jesus is the best teacher we could ever ask for.
That's right.
He knows everything. He can just help us through it. And I know, you know, starting out law school and everybody was, you know, trying to sound real smart in class and, you know, answer with these big, you know, huge words. And I'm like, I don't even know what they're talking about. But I just started crying out, God, I want to learn you through this. I don't want to just make it through law school, but I want to really come to know you through this. And one of the first nights after class, the dean of the law school had come in and had this big speech about what is justice, and everybody was giving their opinions about what was right and wrong and how to decide it. And I was reading, not even thinking about what had just been said that day, I was reading in Proverbs 2, and it says, "And my son, if you will receive my words and treasure up my commandments within you, making your ear attentive to skillful and godly wisdom, and inclining and directing your heart and mind to understanding, applying all your powers to the quest for it. Yes, if you cry out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek wisdom as for silver and search for skillful and godly wisdom as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the reverent, worshipful fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of our God. For the Lord gives skillful and godly wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding." And it just so encouraged me that, you know, God's the one that gives knowledge and understanding, and he can provide the answers. And when the teacher, I'm sure you remember in school being cold called, and
Yes.
the teacher just says, well, Mr. Kidd, what do you think?
Right.
And it's just like you're just suddenly caught off guard. But and then it keeps going. It says, then you will understand righteousness, justice, and fair dealing in every area and relation. Yes, you will understand every good path. And that's where I just really purposed in my heart that I wanted to seek God and cry out to God for his knowledge, for his insight. And through that, God really showed up and helped me and taught me, even though there's teachers there teaching me, but God was there to help me to make sure I understood, what I was being taught. And I remember one of the first tests I had, because a lot of the classes, as I'm sure you remember, are you go through the whole class, and then at the end there's a final.
Right.
And that final counts maybe 70, 80, 90, or even 100% of your grade. So you can do great participating in class. You can, take all the notes you want, but if you're not doing well in the final, you're not going to do good.
Right.
And I just remember crying out, God, what do I study? Because there's so many topics. It was just, you couldn't humanly know everything for the test. And I just remember the Saturday before the test just saying, God, show me what to study. And he led me to certain topics, and I was reviewing those topics, and I didn't really think anything of it. I just thought, okay. And I felt like God told me, you're ready for the test. And so the test came around, and I opened up the page to the big question that was the big essay,
Right.
and it was exactly the topics that I had studied a few days before.
Right.
And it was just amazing to me. It was like, God did that for me. I
Yes.
knew God did that. It was nothing that I did, no understanding that I had of my own, but God had led me to that exact topic, and it just built my faith for the next test, and for the next test, that God helped me last time, he can help me this time. And even now in my everyday life, we all face challenges. We all face things where we don't know what to do, but God is right there all the time. And one of my favorite verses that I would read before every test, and it just really encouraged me, is in James 1. It says, if any of you lacks wisdom to guide him through a decision or a circumstance, he is to ask of our benevolent God, who gives to everyone generously and without rebuke or blame, and it will be given him. And I can say that that's true, because God did that for me every time I asked him, every time I sought him and said, God, show me, what do I need to do? What is the thing I need to learn out of this case, or whatever it is? God was always there to guide me through it.
And, Jonathan, of course, when I went to law school, it was 20 years ago. But I still remember it very vividly. And just like you said, you have that one test that you were sharing about. In law school, just for those who don't know, law school oftentimes is based on just one test. You have one test at the end of the semester. You sat there all day in class, and then you have one test to get it right. And as you said, you can't possibly remember and memorize everything you just learned in the semester. And it's a miracle that God showed you exactly what to study. He showed you that question. And one of the things that stands out to me, Jonathan, that you said was that God taught you, even going to the Christian school when you were young, that Jesus himself will be your teacher, that he will give you the tongue of a disciple, and that all of his children are taught by God. And so when you're in law school, what I'm hearing is that when you're listening to the teacher teaching, at the same time, God is teaching you. The teacher's up there and he's speaking, but you're listening to God and what God has to say. And you have to read so much material. I mean, when we were there, that's all we did. You go home and read. You read at night. You wake up in the morning. You have your book. You read. But the whole time, what I'm hearing from you is that God was your teacher all of those 3 years in law school, even in the midst of having these high quality professional teachers. God was beyond that, the one who was speaking to you. This is what you need to know.
That's right. And I remember one of the next tests I had after that first one, the teacher I mean, they were great teachers, but it was also the tests were designed to, everything was done on a curve, so they they couldn't have everybody do good on the tests. They had to make them real challenging. And one of the next tests I had, it had 4 multiple choice questions, and so each one of them was worth a huge percentage of your grade, because if you missed one, then that's 25% gone. And the questions were set up, you probably remember this too. It would ask a question, and then it would say yes because this, yes because of something else, no because of something, and no because of something else. So even if you got the yes or no part right, you still had to get the second half right. And then the teachers would come along and say, well, there's actually a couple correct answers, but you got to pick the one that's most correct. And so just a natural reasoning, trying to figure this out, I did terrible with that. And one verse that, really God showed me is in Proverbs 16. It says, the plans of the mind and orderly thinking belong to man, but from the Lord comes the wise answer of the tongue. And as much as you knew in your head and much as you prepared, you still in the test had to say, God, which one do I pick? Because if you thought about it too much, number one, you'd waste time, and number two, you'd end up with the wrong answer. And just that was a huge everyday example for me, learning how to hear from God. And when I missed it, because I did, and then it'd be like, God, forgive me. I got thinking about something instead of really settling down to hear what you were saying to me. And just even in the evenings, you get done studying and it's like, what do you do now? Or in the morning getting ready, I just would sit down and read my Bible, and God would just speak things to me that would give me peace and show me, this is what I want for you to do today. This is how you can, keep your mind focused to sit there and study for 6 hours straight, or whatever it is, or sing, or whatever it was. And it would always just give me so much peace that it, people ask me like, was it difficult, or, how did you make it through it? But it's only God. And because of that, I had the grace of God with me during that time. And like you said, I think it was after the first year of school, I wasn't seeking it out or trying to find, some place to go work or whatever. And the school came to me and said, we heard of some opportunities. Would you want to apply to work or to intern at the North Carolina Supreme Court over the summer? And, it was just God opened that door for me, met Justice Newby, and it was just amazing how it was an example to me of just the humility in his life and how he really tried to seek God in everything he did, regardless of all the intellectual stuff that people would say and do. He just really sought to hear what's the right decision here, what's the right way to approach this. And even through that experience, I learned God so much, just with tight deadlines, and he would work us hard, but God taught me things through that even now I can use today. And so that was, a huge blessing for me too.
And you still have some contact, and you mentioned that he even would have Bible studies with lawyers and judges, and that is so impressive that he is so devoted like that. And of course now he's our chief judge over the entire court system of North Carolina. But that is really a testimony that first of all, that God opened the door for you to be with him, and you still have some contact through he has Bible studies that go throughout the state.
He tries to just reach out, especially to young lawyers and just people that, need some kind of mentor that's, some kind of, a lot of people don't have anybody that really can, especially from a Christian perspective, there's not that many people out there that really are strong in their faith. And so he does that to try to help, encourage people. And it's just amazing to see, just knowing him, how humble he is and where God's put him.
So. And Jonathan, you shared in Proverbs, and that's such a powerful verse about the plans of the mind. And orderly thinking belong to man, but God has the wise answer. And I was thinking about you in law school, and you're sitting there the first day. It reminds me of me. I'll never forget it. This was at UNC Chapel Hill 20 years ago. At that time, I had a education degree going in. I didn't have any experience with the court system. And it seemed like when I showed up at law school, Jonathan, everybody in the room seemed like they were lawyers the way they talked. I mean, they were not, but and I remember sitting in this huge room with all of these people giving the greatest answers that I've ever heard. I can relate to you. You know, day one, you're just thinking, listen to all these people. But I love that verse that you shared, because even in the midst of law school, even in the midst of people that are highly intelligent, and like you and me, everybody was the top of their class. But it's amazing how even as smart as a man can be, even having natural ability and intellect, God is the one who ultimately has the answer. He's the one who knows. He is wiser than anybody, and from him is the ultimate answer of truth. And you have lots of plans. You hear all kinds of answers in those classrooms, don't you? And
Definitely.
you know, you can analyze things, but when you just settled down and you asked God, it's like the multiple choice. You ask God, God, which is the answer? God would speak to you. And he is the one who has the wise answer. So, and I know that carried you through law school, and it's carried you through even now.
Yeah, I think one verse that talks about in John about how Jesus will bring things to your remembrance, and that was
Yes.
a huge key for me. It's just during school each day, God help me to hear what I need to hear today.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it didn't end up in my notes, because you can't write down everything that's said, but then you get on the test and it's like God would remind you, remember when they said this, and it would be what I needed to answer that question.
Right.
And even finishing up law school, God helped me through that. Then the next test was obviously the bar exam. So you studied for 2 or 3 months, and I studied hard. Was crying out, God, show me what to do. How do I study? And one verse that really helped me through that time is in John 14, and it says, "But the Helper," it's talking about the Holy Spirit, "whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things, and he will help you remember everything that I have told you. Peace I leave with you, my perfect peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give you. Do not let your heart be troubled, nor let it be afraid. Let my perfect peace calm you in every circumstance and give you courage and strength for every challenge." And I remember going into the tests, and I'd studied, we'd prayed, and
Right.
everybody, all my friends and people, like Mark, were there encouraging me. But it got to the test, and it was 2 days. The first section was a 90-minute section in the morning, and there was two questions in that 90-minute section, but they didn't call, I'm sorry, it was a 3-hour section. You had 90 minutes in each. Mm-hmm. So they didn't call, oh, you're halfway or whatever. It was just straight 3 hours, and you had to manage your own time. And you can't take a watch. You couldn't, it was real strict. So you had to look at the clock on the wall. So I get going, and I'm, going at it, and I'm going through the first question. I needed to spend 90 minutes on the first one, 90 minutes on the second. And I'm almost done with the first one. I thought, this is going good. Seems like I'm ahead of time. And then I realized, and I looked over at the clock, and I had spent like close to 2 hours on the first question. So that left me like 30 minutes short on the second question. And it was like a pit in my stomach. Suddenly it was like, here you spent months getting ready for this. This one 3-hour thing is like 25% of your bar exam grade. What are you going to, but where God had taught me from all these other tests, and like this scripture says, let my peace be right there, and courage and strength for every challenge. And I just remember praying and just taking that second instead of, your fingers can only type so fast, just settling down and saying, God, you've got to help me. Forgive me. Somewhere I looked at the clock and got the hands mixed up and miscalculated the time, and here I am running out of time. And it was just totally supernatural. I just took hold of God inside me and asked God, and it was like he just started typing through me. I didn't even have to spend as much time reading and going through it, and I did great on the test.
Yes.
And so that's how even today, I may not have a bar exam every day, but in everyday life, we all have things where we don't know what the answer is. We don't know what to tell. Sometimes I don't know what to tell a client. Do you tell them to do something or not do something? And you've got the voice of God and the peace of God that's right there to help tell you this is what you should do. This is what you should not do.
Right.
And I'm just grateful for that peace that, we're learning every day through those tests. God was able to help me on the bar exam to have that peace, even when it seemed like a terrible mistake I had made.
Right. And I want to hear about your practice now and how God taught you lessons through law school, and those have carried over to your practicing. First, tell us what kind of areas of law do you practice? Or I know it's a big variety right now. You're the guy that you're the newer guy, and you get a lot of new big projects and different unique projects.
That's correct. So I do a lot of criminal defense. People that are in jail or facing some kind of jail time or different things. And then I do some family work, not as near as much as Mark does, but a lot of just general stuff. Like you said, people call in and they have a problem with their neighbor or a problem, and it's new stuff every day, and it's not always that I have somebody right there. Hey, have you ever done this before? No. And so it's like, God, what do I do? How do I help this person? And just learning that we don't know. I don't know the answer. Law school doesn't prepare you for that kind of stuff. It really doesn't. Right. But this is what prepared me, is hearing the voice of God and knowing that God has the answer. And if I take the time to just settle down and ask Him and not get out of that place of staying in peace, that God's going to be right there. And it's a great opportunity to share with people. I had someone the other day just in jail, and I was sitting there talking to him, and he just started crying and said, I didn't used to believe in God, but now I do. I'm trying to read my Bible. And, and I was able just to share with him and tell him about what God could do in his life. And he was I think he was surprised. I don't know that he was really expecting, me to talk to him about those types of things, because but it's just every day is hearing God's voice.
Yes. And Jonathan, the most important thing that I'm hearing you say is about your relationship with Jesus Christ. And when you started law school, you were by yourself. You left you had a nice little thing here with all your friends in Rutherford County and your church family, and you had your big family that you have here, your parents, and so you went to law school. You're by yourself there, and tell us a little bit just about just the relationship with Jesus every day in the midst of going to law school, and you're having to have those textbooks, which I remember just constantly before you. You're at a big university. You have a lot of people there that are in the world, and you're a Christian. But just tell us about how you walk through that, and even today in your practice, just that personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
I know one big thing that God taught me is we have to hear His voice at every point. And when we keep that before us, that God, I want to hear your voice today. I want to do what you want me to do today. And when I would feel like something's wrong, somewhere I got overwhelmed or whatever, I just remember even once being at school and they had these little rooms off the library. You could just go in. It was like a little study room, and I'd shut the door and I'd stop, put away all my books, and just say, Jesus, what are you speaking to me? And, a lot of these verses I share with you are ones that He spoke to me in times like that, where I felt stuck. I didn't feel, and I wasn't used to being, away from everybody for the week while I studied. And then I would drive back, come back on the weekends and study at home. But God was teaching me that my stability has to be in God, that I've got to hear what's God saying right here, right now to me. And that's where I can be stable. Not being stable just because I'm around my friends or around somebody, but just learning, just on that drive back and forth, I would just cry out, God, help me this week. Show me what I need to study. Show me, what I need to avoid, because there's a lot that goes on in law school I didn't need to be a part of.
Right.
But God was always there, and just having that relationship to really hear at any given moment, what is God saying to me right now?
Very good, Jonathan. And I'm thinking of Proverbs 3 as you're sharing. And I know this is something that you have seen in your life. Proverbs 3:5, and it says, "Lean on, trust in, and be confident in the Lord with all your heart and mind, and do not rely on your own insight and understanding." In the natural, Jonathan, you're a smart person, and I've seen you. I've just seen your ability. I've seen you handle court cases. We've sent you cases that we couldn't handle, those cases that were difficult and unique. I've seen your God-given talent and ability is very great, but I've also heard your heart, and your heart is, even though God has equipped you with an intellect and skills and abilities, I have heard your heart today, Jonathan, that your heart is that you don't want to rely on your own insight, and I think that's a testimony, because I know you recognize that God has given you that intellect. My wife. We were actually, you and I were just with her recently, and we were talking about doing this program. And one of the things that my wife Holly said that stood out to me was that apart from God, there's nothing good in any of us. And ever since she said that, Jonathan, it's just been ringing in me. Like there's God gives us these abilities, but apart from Him, apart from doing Proverbs 3, which is that we've got to trust in Him and not rely on our own insight, there's nothing good in us. And it's amazing, ever since she said that, it's just like I woke up and I thought, today, there's nothing good that I can do apart from Him. And the nice thing about that, when she said that, is it's so freeing, because that means that we don't have to do it. Yet God's given us these great abilities, but it's going to be Him that shows us. And of course, the rest of that was in verse 6 in Proverbs. It says, "In all your ways, know and recognize and acknowledge Him, and He will direct and make straight your paths." And then it goes on and it says, "Be not wise in your own eyes. Reverently fear and worship the Lord, and turn away from evil." And that is such a key, Jonathan, that God is working that in your heart. And I hear your heart, that God doesn't want us to be wise in our own eyes. We don't know how to help these people in the practice of law. We may know the law. We know how to look up the law. But it is God that gives us the answers. And I know as you continue your practice, and I've seen this in my life, as you have people come to you with their problems, we can turn our heart to God. We can actually know, as you read in Proverbs, it says that the plans of there are plans that belong to man, but then God has the answer. Yeah. And I know that's your heart. It's my heart, and as you said, I do family law, and you do some family law. Specifically, I think of that right now, that people come with just terrible situations. You've seen some of that, and when they come, Jonathan, with their broken relationships, then we can say, we don't know the answers, but we know a God who has all of the wise answers. And I'm sure you've seen that too.
That's definitely correct. And I think one thing where God's really teaching me is, like, for example, in a trial, right. I don't have near as much trial experience like you do. And sometimes you can ask one question too many, and you can right. get yourself in trouble. And you got to hear from God. God, what do I ask? What do I not ask? And I was thinking of this verse in Isaiah 30 about how God is waiting right there to be gracious to us, waiting to help us. And then it says, your ears will hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it, when you turn to the right hand and when you turn to the left. And that's where I want to be able to be, that it's not me helping somebody, but it's God through me helping somebody.
That's so good. And the nice thing about this is that we know when you walk into the courtroom, and I have this too, walking in, God, it's got to be you. You're the one here to help me. And I've had that too, Jonathan. You sit down at the table and you're in the midst of a huge trial. And I just finished one that went on for days and days. And in the midst of it, God is there with the wise answer. He's there if we say we will not lean on our own understanding, but we'll lean on Him. He gives us the answer in every single case, every single person's life. So anyways, Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing. Amazing testimony. And we thank you for listening today. Again, this is Word of Faith Fellowship radio program. And all of our radio programs are video. You can watch them. They're on our website. That is www.wordoffaithfellowship.org. And we're on this program Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8:30 to 9. Thank you very much.